Citizen Vigilante. Why the fear? Why are social institutions all in an uproar? Why did Germany feel the need to outright ban this low-budget B-movie, with other countries to soon follow? Why are all the usual suspects on social media clutching their pearls, having a freakout?
Don't you understand, Randy? Citizen Vigilante is nothing more than revenge porn. It's just a modern retelling of Charles Bronson's Death Wish series. It's inciting violence towards marginalized voices, so therefore it has to be stopped.
You're correct, mysterious spooky voice. Citizen Vigilante is a modern retelling of Death Wish. It's also a modern retelling of Lethal Weapon, Die Hard, Dirty Harry, Shane, The Odyssey. It's a modern retelling of one of the oldest tropes in human history. The individual who's willing to take matters into their own hands in an effort to seek redress for perceived wrongs. They're seeking justice. And that's what has social institutions quaking in their boots. Citizens demanding justice. Not law, justice.
Architectural Outcast.
In the movie Shane, we have the classic story of the powerful cattle baron in conflict with small ranchers and farmers. And all of this takes place on the frontier, a land without law, without police, without courts, without judges, without prisons. They all exist in what John Locke and the American founding fathers would call a state of nature. The problem that Joe Starlett and the other farmers face is that on one hand, they're Civil War veterans, so they're very familiar with violence and proficient with violence. But on the other hand, they've recently come from civilization, a place of laws, police, courts, and judges, and they continue to act as if they live with laws, police, courts, and judges. Whereas in this time and this place, the cattle baron understands that the strong decide what is law. In rides Shane, the personification of the state of nature. I mean, he's wearing flippin' buckskins. If that ain't symbolic, I don't know what is. And Shane understands that the only way Joe Starlett and the other farmers are going to get justice is if they take it for themselves. The movie also shows the personal cost of seeking justice in the state of nature. First off, it's dangerous. Depending on how you interpret the ending of the movie, Shane dies seeking justice for Joe Starlett and the other farmers. Assuming he lives, he's still lost everything. His place in the community, his friends, his future, his dreams, everything. That's why humans created civilization with its associated governments, to remove the need for individuals to dispense justice and place it into the hands of institutions. The idea is when you put justice in the hands of institutions, you slow things down, remove the heat and passion of the moment, and you make dispensing justice neutral, impersonal, reliable, and consistent. At this point, we need to ask the question, why are people obsessed with justice? Why do people in the state of nature have the right to pursue justice? I mean, if it's a dog-eat-dog world, survival of the fittest, who cares if the strong and powerful lie, cheat, steal, rob, pillage, murder? I mean, the strong make the laws, right? Then why does every government that has ever existed claim that their moral authority, their very legitimacy, is dependent upon the fact that they are the official arbiters and dispensers of justice? It's because justice is a force of nature, a law of the universe. There's a reason why scales are the symbol of justice. Injustice brings about an imbalance, and nature abhors imbalance. It's going to fix things one way or another. And I'm not talking about karma or some sort of spiritual, supernatural intervention. It's as inevitable as an apple falling to the ground after you've thrown it in the air. It's just better for everyone involved if people solve the problem, because the universe tends to be as subtle as a sledgehammer. It's usually this point in the conversation that somebody speaks up and says, hey, person X did this really bad thing and they got away with it, so therefore that proves that justice isn't a force of nature. Are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? Humans have a tendency to become very demanding when it comes to dispensing justice. They want to determine when, where, why, and how. And when it doesn't happen right now, they throw their hands in the air and cry foul. And in the process, often miss when it comes slamming down. Case in point, seeing as how we're talking about movies, Hollywood has a very specific reputation. Hedonism, debauchery, and outright criminal activity. This institutionalized injustice has gone on for generations and continues to this day. So they've gotten away with it, right? Whenever you look into the lives of the people involved in these shenanigans, you will often find a consistent pattern. Peel back the facade, the wealth, the glitz, the glamour, you will find miserable people leading pathetic lives as a direct result of the shenanigans they were up to. They end up paying a price I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. That's one of the reasons why Hollywood as an institution is failing. They've lost their moral authority, their legitimacy, because they become dispensers of injustice. And that's the pattern we see with governments. Every time they stop being the representative of justice, they lose their moral authority and legitimacy, and it's a matter of time before they fall. Going back to the American Declaration of Independence, it's explicit when it says that a government is no longer representing justice, when it no longer protects the life, liberty, and the ability to pursue happiness of the citizen. They are no longer legitimate. They have crossed over into tyranny. This idea that governments have to be just and protect their people is nothing new. In ancient China, Korea, and Japan, it was called the mandate of heaven. In the West, divine right to rule. As long as a government was just and protected its people, it was seen as a living manifestation of heaven. But as soon as a government became corrupt, self-motivated, tyrannical, or worse, actively harmed their citizens, they would lose the divine right to rule, the mandate of heaven.
Yeah, sure, Randy. Every government that's ever existed claims they're backed by heaven. And everybody who ever wanted to replace them claimed, no, we're the real ones who are backed by heaven. It's all just political machinations and justification, propaganda.
You're right, mysterious spooky voice. Almost every government that has ever existed has claimed the mandate of heaven, one way or another. And many of them felt the need to declare that in their propaganda to justify their rule. But what is often overlooked in this is why those governments felt the need to make the claim in the first place. Let me give you all an example of exactly what I'm talking about. In the 1930s, when Mustache Guy and his pals took over Germany, they weren't just doing regime change, they were trying to create an entirely new civilization. Their argument was that the old order had become corrupt and decadent, and it had been intentionally destroyed by naughty people. So therefore, they were going to create a whole new civilization that was going to be so just that the heavens would bless it with a 1,000-year reign. 1940 rolls around, and Germany launches its attack on England. And what was confirmed after the war is that once England fell, Germany planned to rule with a very light hand. In fact, leading up to and during the Battle of Britain, high-level elements of the British government, up to and including the king, allegedly, were in active negotiations with Germany to be left in place as a puppet government once England fell. I use the word confirmed because at the time, Germany wasn't shy about telling everybody their intentions. They were telling the English people, look, we don't have a problem with you guys. We just have a problem with some of the naughty elements of your government. Don't fight us. Come join us. Become willing collaborators in this new 1,000-year civilization. What's more, the British people knew that elements of their government were already jumping overboard like rats off a sinking ship, because those elements were telling everybody what they were doing. They were openly questioning, should they be fighting Germany? Were they maybe on the wrong side? Instead of surrendering, what we got was the Battle of Britain, where the British people fought so tenaciously that up to this point, unstoppable German military juggernaut had to call off the invasion. The British people weren't fighting for that particular government, and why should they? What they were fighting for was their civilization, because they believed it was far more just than the civilization that Germany was offering. Whenever a civilization loses its mandate, becomes corrupt, unjust, or worse, actively harms its own citizens, it doesn't necessarily fall in a day. I mean, a rotten tree can last for centuries. But there are always signs that things are not going well, cracks in the foundation, civil and social unrest, and there are always warnings. And those warnings can come from some interesting places, like movies. Clint Eastwood's Dirty Harry portrays the police as becoming so bureaucratic, ideologically driven, and corrupt that they are no longer even making a pretense of pursuing justice. All they care about are enforcing their arbitrary rules for arbitrary reasons. Justice has left the institution and has returned back to the individual. 1960s, 70s San Francisco is shown to be no longer civilized. It exists in a state of nature. In Bruce Willis's Die Hard, the police and federal alphabet agencies aren't particularly interested in foiling Hans Gruber's nefarious plans. Instead, they're more concerned with preserving their own institutional power, something that Hans plans to exploit for his own benefit. And the movie makes it very clear that if Hans had gotten away with this scheme, that the police and various alphabet agencies would have covered it all up, all again to preserve their institutional power. Just like with Dirty Harry, justice has returned back into the hands of the individual. But this time around, John McClane, not only does he have to fight against Hans and the other criminals, he has to fight against the very institutions who are supposed to be doing the job that he's doing. Nakatomi Plaza exists in a state of nature. In Lethal Weapon, a quasi-government agency is doing all sorts of evil stuff. In Lethal Weapon 2, the government is literally protecting the criminals. Diplomatic immunity. At the end of Lethal Weapon, when Riggs fights Mr. Joshua in Murtaugh's front yard, the American suburbs have returned to a state of nature. And the police, the institution that are supposed to uphold justice, are neutered. They're worse than neutered. They're irrelevant. All they do is stand around and watch the individual dispense justice. By the mid-2000s, every social institution had become ideologically captured. Education, academia, entertainment, the media, the police. What's worse are those social institutions like the entertainment industry and the media who are supposed to speak truth to power have become corrupted and co-opted and are now the voice of power. That's why it's been 20 years plus since the last time we saw a Dirty Harry, a Lethal Weapon, a Death Wish. It's because it's not in the interests of those in power to have that type of warning go out. However, with corruption comes the loss of legitimacy, the loss of trust. No one cares about the mainstream media anymore. That's why Hollywood is going bankrupt. And then the technology changed. An individual can now make a movie for pennies on the dollar what it costs the institution. See a theme here? And with Elon Musk buying Twitter X, that movie can now get distribution, be seen. The ability to gatekeep and control the narrative is now collapsing. So if a movie like Citizen Vigilante hits nerve, enters the zeitgeist, it can now be seen by millions, potentially billions. That's why the German government and pretty much every other Western government are terrified of movies like Citizen Vigilante. It's not because they care about the movie in of itself. They're terrified of the symbolism, the warning that they might have lost the mandate. They're terrified that their citizens might remember the truth found in the Declaration of Independence, that their only legitimacy comes from their protecting the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness of their citizens. And what we've seen here lately in England, Ireland, and elsewhere, it looks like these governments are doing the exact opposite, which makes them even more terrified that their citizens might remember the other part of the Declaration of Independence. At any rate, I hope I've given you all something to think about, and until next time, y'all be safe. If y'all are still here, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. While you're at it, why don't you like this video, subscribe to the channel, click that notification bell. You can hear me yammer on about something else next time, and feel free to share this video far and wide.
Please like and subscribe. Please leave a comment.